So thanks for coming back by the channel. I appreciate the continued views. I know that when I took down a bunch of the videos, I ran a risk of losing about a lot of subscribers. I gained 2, lost 1, gained 2 more. So I'm at 435. So it's slowed down a little bit, but I'm thankful. Robe Regiment, you are over the target. Today, it's going to be a heavy topic, but not emotionally heavy. We're going to be talking about cancel culture, freedom of speech, and government interference. So why would I link cancel culture, freedom of speech, and government interference? Oh my, all into kind of this one category. As I've said in the last couple of videos, we've talked a little bit about the role of government in the freedom of speech. We've talked about how government isn't merely supposed to refrain from infringing upon the free exercise of speech, the free exercise of religion, and not to infringe upon any of the other liberties that are contained within the Bill of Rights. Those first 10 core amendments, the building block of all of the other amendments and the anchor of what the Constitution stands for. So why continued emphasis on this? Because cancel culture and freedom of speech and government infringement are inextricably linked. They're all right here. And one of the reasons this is somewhat on my mind is because we are seeing that some governments in the United States, some governmental entities, elected servants, are now starting to push back against cancel culture. They're starting to push back against social media platforms and their censorship of people. And that's exactly what government is supposed to do. Like, people are all aghast. They're infringing on the freedom of the social media platform. No, they're not. They're not infringing on the freedom of the social media platform. They're actually requiring the social media platform to do the right thing, which is not infringe upon the freedom of speech. And why do I say that? Because, as I've said in other videos and talked about on numerous occasions, government's role is not merely to step back and go, hey, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. So you can't get mad at us. You can't hold us accountable. It's not our fault. You know, we're not doing this. We're not getting involved. That's not their job. The job of government, every elected official, every elected servant, every single one of them. I don't care if your dog catcher is an elected official. Like, if your town is so weird that you elect the dog catcher, I know nobody has dog. We now have animal control. But if your town's so weird that you elect the dog catcher, and when they're elected, they take that oath, his job is not merely to not infringe upon your freedom of speech or your right to keep and bear arms, or not, you know, no cruel and unusual punishment for you from the dog catcher. Not at all. No, it's not just that. He has a responsibility, and any elected servant, and there again, remember, every single person that's elected is not an official. They're not a ruler. They're a servant. Okay? Any elected servant has a responsibility to protect your freedom of speech, no matter how much they hate it. Okay? So when YouTube comes for you, when Twitter comes for you, when Facebook comes for you, when whatever other platform comes for you and to silence you, or let's say the leftist Marxist of the world don't like what you're saying. You know, let's say you're one of those people who holds elected servants accountable, and they come for you to shut you down, or they want you to be canceled from YouTube, or they want you taken off of Facebook, or they start a campaign against you. They don't get to do that. And not only should the social media platforms not be allowed to do that to you, but elected servants should step in at that point in time and say, no, you don't get to do this. Like, yes, as individuals who maybe run the social media platform, you too have freedom of speech, but you don't get to use your freedom of speech to infringe on the freedom of speech of other people. And you don't get to shut down people you don't like. You don't get to shut down people who say things that you don't agree with. You don't get to shut down people for saying things that are unpopular to you. And so where we're at, and there again, I've said this numerous times. I'm sorry, I'm trying to stay healthy, drinking me some chicken bone broth, or organic chicken bone broth. It's good. It doesn't leave a sweet, cloying taste in your mouth like soda, and I strongly recommend it. And no, nobody's sponsoring this video yet. So what we're dealing with, and what we should be concentrating on, is telling people you don't get to do that. Okay, so here's the issue: unless government steps in and tells social media platforms that they don't get to shut people down, and let's be honest, it's going to be really hard for anybody to compete with Facebook. It's going to be really hard for anybody to compete with Twitter. It's going to be really hard for anybody to compete with YouTube right now. And I'm thankful for platforms like Rumble and Library and BitChute. I'm really looking hard at how I'm going to expand those and my presence in those places. I mean, I'm thankful for 435 subscribers here on YouTube, but I'm a long ways from getting monetized, and they're going to stand in my way. They'll do everything they can when I do get to that level where I can be monetized. They're going to actively demonetize certain videos, and the ones that have the most views, they're going to try and shut those down to lower my hours of watch time so that they can say, look, you don't qualify for monetization, which there again is fine. So, so you start to look for sponsors and whatnot. That's all well and good. But you're just going to have a hard time competing with a lot of the big tech social media platforms. It's going to be difficult. And so somebody to come along and launch something that has the exact same impact as YouTube for video content creators such as myself or others out there, we are somewhat limited in how we can get our voice out, how we can get our messages out. And government should be stepping in and telling those platforms, like, you can't be held responsible for what people are saying on your platform, but you also cannot be silencing people because you're open. Now, you want to make people pay to use your service? Fine. But if you're not going to make people pay, then you don't get to tell them what they can and cannot say on your platform, as long as it's not actively advocating for violence or harm to people, places, or things. So here's how censorship happens by the government. They do not actively go out and say, you cannot be conservative, you cannot be a patriot, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. What they do is they step out of the way of private businesses. They step out of the way of employers at every level. And they say, employers, you don't have to hire somebody if you don't like their speech. So if you don't like a person's politics, you don't have to hire them. If you find out that they take a position you don't agree with, you can fire them, or you can discipline them, or you can do whatever you want, as long as it's strictly based on their politics. Now, that's atrocious. And it's actively and functionally stifling the freedom of speech in the United States today. I mentioned a young man that I met at a rally this last year in 2020. We interacted a little bit through social media, and he worked for the Trump campaign. He didn't volunteer. He actually worked for the Trump campaign. Ultimately, we're in a position now where Trump is no longer president. And so now he has to have a job. And even though he does not mention that he worked for the Trump campaign, people have found out he worked for the Trump campaign, and they will not hire him. And they tell him, you worked for Trump. We don't like you. We don't like Trump, and we don't like people who work for him. And so we're not going to hire you. You have all the qualifications that we're looking for, but we're not going to hire you. And so Sure, that's their prerogative. Absolutely. But is it right? And that's the question. See, we have failed in the United States to understand and recognize that freedom of speech is far more than just being free to say what you want to say, having the liberty to speak your mind, but then also having to, be responsible for those things that you say. And that's true. If a person runs into a crowded movie theater and screams fire, or pulls some sort of stunt that causes people to panic and people get hurt or could get hurt, or the potential for people to get hurt over something fallacious like screaming fire in the crowded movie theater, that's not free. You don't have the freedom to say that, okay? But if a person holds a view that you don't agree for or agree with or aren't supportive of, should you be able to strip from them the pursuit of life and liberty and happiness? No, you don't get to do that. And government has got to start to intervene in these places. They have to. Because what they're effectively doing now is they're not protecting and defending the Constitution. They're not. Elected servants all over the United States are backing down. They're just backing down. Okay, it's the cultural norm right now. As two people who I really respect and appreciate, Carter and Carrie of the Unsafe Space podcast, have been pointing out, and I've been saying it for a long time, but they've been pointing it out, and they have a massive platform. I mean, they get more views in the first 15 minutes of one of their videos or one of their live streams than I've gotten in a year. Okay, total, period. So they have a massive platform, and people have tried to silence them. But what we have got to start to do is we have to point out that the social justice, woke ideology, critical race theory, critical sexual theory, all of these things have gone mainstream. And they're now actively silencing anybody who stands up against them with the tacit support of government, with elected servants. And so if you're one of those people whose employer is like, knock it off, we don't have to like your politics. And because we don't like your politics, we're going to get rid of you, or we're going to harass you, or we're going to strip from you that your life in your pursuit of happiness. You can go somewhere else if you want to work, or you can shut up. That is dangerous. That's dangerous. Because if they can do it to you, they can do it to anybody. So that's why the First Amendment is being ripped to shreds. And it's not being ripped to shreds actively by government, by elected servants. The problem is people are flaunting the fact that they're ripping the First Amendment to shreds in front of government, and government servants, elected servants, are standing there actively applauding them, saying, no, you go right ahead. We're not going to get involved. And in some cases, government servants are actively shredding up the Constitution too for the people that work for them. I'm aware of a person who was there again. I've mentioned one person that I know who was fired from a private employer for merely being in Washington, D.C. with 3.5 million other people. Just merely being there, just fired. And that's happened to numerous people. I'm getting reports every day, all the time, coming in constantly. People are like, hey, TC, this is happening to a friend of mine. This is happening to me. But I'm actually been in communication with a person who works for a municipality and has done so for over 28 years. And they're sitting at home waiting for adjudication, basically, and arbitration for merely being in Washington, D.C. Their municipality, they are a city employee. They're being disciplined to the point of they're trying to terminate this person and a friend for going to Washington, D.C. That's asinine. You shouldn't be able to do that. Demonstrate the harm. Demonstrate it. You can't do that. And that's why our government is failing us. Not only do you, in the case of this person I am in communication with, 28 years, 28 years. And they're trying to get rid of him for being in DC. Now, hopefully their union steps up, and I've never thought I'd come to the day where I'd become more and more, as conservative as I am, I'm becoming more and more supportive of unions for public employees, because it's getting nuts. Now, it's just not enough to fight it back against cancel culture. You know, to some degree, you come at somebody and you try to cancel them, you're probably going to blow up their platform in a positive way, because they'll just move on to another place, or they're just going to find a way to get their voice out there. And if you get them, fired from their job, and there again, imagine if that person said, "Fine, gloves are off. You took everything from me. You won, Antifa. You won, Black Lives Matter. You won, Black Bloc. You won, New Black Liberation Army. You won, leftist Marxist so-and-so from such and such. You won. You got it figured out. You found out a way to hurt me. But gloves are off. The gloves are off. The bets are off now. And here's why. Because what do I have to lose now? Could you imagine an entire army of public voices saying, you canceled me. You did everything you could to strip from me my life, my liberty, and my pursuit of happiness. So guess what? It's over. I don't have anything to be silent about now. So to some degree, you might be blowing up in a positive way that person's ability to expose you. And that's something that people need to start understanding in this cancel culture environment. You're going to make us big. And there have been people that have been coming at my channel since its inception. I had one person, "Oh, he's a paleoconservative. We must stop him." Do you even know what a paleoconservative is? It just means I'm not a reactionary Fox News conservative who gets all my news from Sean Hannity and rest his soul, the Rush Limbaughs of the world. I'm not a reactionary conservative. I have traditional paleoconservative values that are rooted in my Christianity. So let's silence the paleoconservative. He's dangerous. I've had people, he's a fascist. And then they try to silence me, thereby proving that they're the fascist. So when you have the power and you use your power to silence people, that's fascism. That's authoritarianism. It's fascism. People, he's a Christian. So? He doesn't think the way we want him to. Okay. So? The thing is I'm going to fight for you. While you're trying to silence me, I'm going to fight for you to keep your voice. So, I mean, who's going to fight for you when you end up on the wrong side of an argument, right? Because if you can get me canceled, they can cancel you. If you can get this individual I'm in communication with fired from their job of 28 years, we can get you fired from yours. I mean, let that sink in. So it's like this really dangerous minefield that we're in. Running around and going, they're dangerous. What's that help? They don't think the right way. Okay. When the risque idea of the day is to be pro-life against the murder of children in the womb, when the risque idea is to say that I agree with Martin Luther King Jr. that people should be judged on the content of their character instead of the color of their skin, and you call that dangerous, you call that violence, they're going to be able to come for you. And I'll fight for you, but I'm going to laugh a little bit too. Because sooner or later, you're going to run afoul of someone. And as the Overton window shifts back from the left towards the center, towards the conservative side, when the conservatives start to silence you, I'll fight for you, but I'm going to have a wry little chuckle when you lose your job or when they try to get you canceled because you don't have the right views. And so every person out there who is all for cancel culture, who's all for using bullying and silencing techniques against the people you disagree with, or if you're an elected servant and you think it's okay for you to shut down somebody because you don't like their opinion, if you're a public servant and you don't like somebody's opinion and so you use your power and your authority to get them shut down because you don't like something that they said, they can come for you eventually. And I'll fight for you, but I'm going to laugh a little bit too. So until next time, Sic Semper Tyrannis.